Hello and welcome to John Wesley's house. Thank you for joining us again. Today we're looking at three very special items which belong to John Wesley. Some shoes, some cuffs, and also his preaching bands. Right, well, let's start with the shoes. We're very lucky in that we actually have John Wesley's shoes still, considering that these are about 240 years old. They are in very good condition. Now, the first thing that will probably strike you straight away is that they're very small. John Wesley was only 5'3" tall, and consequently his feet were quite short as well. Now, they are made from leather. Very nicely done. Let's have a look at the sole first. It's a full leather sole, hand stitched all around, and the heel is cobbled on with nails, and you can see the remains of the nails all around. This incidentally is our accession number here, so that's not part of the original shoe. The leather is quite thick. It could possibly be calf's leather, it might be another hide, but there's basically very little stitching on the leather itself, only at the sides. So it's one piece of leather they're made from here at the front. And they have some steel buckles. That was the fashion of the time. Again, that's not unusual. They're not very decorative. They wouldn't have been very expensive. Just the kind of thing we would have expected from John Wesley. The shoes are no longer in the best of conditions. As you can see here, the stitching is beginning to come loose. But altogether, very unusual to still have 18th century shoes altogether. So we've got a pair here, and if you look at both shoes together, you will also see that there is no left and no right shoe. They both look exactly the same. Well, in the 18th century, up until about 1800, shoes weren't produced as a left and right. They were usually made as a straight shoe, and they are hence known today as straights. So you could have slipped these on either way. We're no longer used to the appearance of shoes in this way, so it looks rather odd to our eyes, but in the 18th century people wouldn't have thought anything of it. They are also lined, although the lining of the shoe has now disintegrated to some extent further down. There's a view of the sole. So yeah, very interesting to think that these are now over 240 years old and that John Wesley would have worn them. The next item from the collection we're looking at are some cuffs which we know belong to John Wesley. Now if we have a close in, we can have a look at the old label, which dates to the late 1800s, because this is how long they have been in the collection. And these cuffs are made from fine cotton, finely spun, still in good condition, and would have been used slightly differently from cuffs today. So they wouldn't have been attached to a shirt like mine, for instance, are, but they would have come separately, and they would have been turned over the outer garment to protect the outer garment, and later they were used to protect shirts. So they came separately from the shirt, and you protected effectively the beginning of the shirt arm with the cuffs. That was sensible because you could just wash your cuffs separately from the rest of the shirt, which would have protected the shirt long term, and if they got damaged or dirty, then it wouldn't have mattered so much. These cuffs are particularly nice because they bear John Wesley's monogram. Let's have a quick look at that. Actually, it's this way around. So we have an I and a W, and that is because there was no J for John at the time. It would have been, they would have used an I instead. So John Wesley. At the bottom, some holes for cufflinks, or cuff buttons probably at the time, not necessarily even proper metal cufflinks. Unlikely to be of gold or silver anyway. But the idea would have been that they would have been worn like this on your shirt. So effectively, you would have had your cufflinks there, they would have reached over your shirt, and they would have protected the first 5 inches or so of your shirt that way. So that's how cuffs would have been used in the 18th century. Here is our third item we're looking at today, a very special item. These were John Wesley's preaching bands. Now, preaching bands still form part of clerical and academic dress. They are also worn in amended form by lawyers and barristers in court. Now, these, as you can probably see, are very, very fine. The cotton is very fine. You can see my glove hand through. And they would have been hand stitched, of course. Very fine cotton, probably what was referred to as lawn cotton after a French town, Léon, so nothing to do with a meadow like a lawn, just a very fine cotton, now referred to as lawn cotton. And interestingly, these have been sewn onto a stock or neckband, which is quite unusual. These days, they are still in use. These days you would only have a band right at the top. You would no longer have this stock, this cravat, basically. Interesting that they're so small. Usually one would expect them to be slightly larger, but of course John Wesley was a relatively small man, and if he had had much larger preaching bands around his neck, they would have overwhelmed his face. So I think it was deliberate that they were so small. They're still in good condition. A little bit of staining, you can also see the yellowing here, but that's to be expected after over 200 years of age. And they would have been fastened at the back either with small buttons or more likely just with fabric ties. So it would have looked something like this. And you can see the similarity to cravats, really, I suppose, and even ruffs of the 16th and 17th centuries. This is really where this type of neckwear originated. So, a lovely item to have. We are very fortunate to have it still in our collection.